Hi there, I'm Em. Welcome to the Professionals Recovery Room. Today we're getting real about something many professionals have silently endured. Toxic workplaces. You know what I'm talking about. The kind of environment that leaves you second guessing yourself, questioning your worth, and is like high school all over again. Let me just start by sharing a personal experience. I was once in a meeting to review a paper that I had worked on for weeks to propose a new program structure. It was thoughtful, thorough, and aligned with everything leadership had asked for, even when the asks changed a number of times. When I finished presenting during this call, instead of getting feedback on the actual content, people began nitpicking formatting details and offering vague critiques or calling out style choices that had nothing to do with the message. It wasn't about improvement. It was about power and ego. It was about making themselves feel smarter. And that kind of feedback doesn't build anybody up. It just tears people down. And it's a classic sign of a toxic environment. People attacking form instead of engaging with substance. I was not unique in this scenario, and this happened consistently to my peers and even other leaders. So that was one of my examples of experiencing a toxic work environment. But let's talk about what a toxic workplace is not. It's not just a stressful job or a really tough manager. It's really a system where dysfunction is the norm. It's where communication is weaponized, conflict is left unmanaged, and self-worth is eroded over time. And let's be clear, a toxic workplace is not the same as a challenging one. Many of us enjoy a challenging work environment. It's possible to have a demanding job, receive tough feedback, or work with high expectations in a culture that's still healthy. The difference lies in intention and impact. In a healthy culture, challenges come with support, growth opportunities, and mutual respect. In a toxic one, challenges come with blame, manipulation, and emotional harm. Feedback is not meant to help you grow in a toxic environment. It's meant to diminish you or control you. And research is clear that a toxic work environment has a direct impact on employees. A 2022 study by MIT's Sloan Management Review found that toxic work culture is the strongest predictor of employee attrition, 10 times more important than compensation. And another study from the American Psychological Association in 2023 noted that toxic workplaces significantly increase risks of anxiety, depression, and chronic illness. Who wants to stay in a position that continuously chips away at your health, both mentally and physically? And who can do their best creative work and make the best decisions when they're constantly exposed to these conditions? In toxic work environments, your nervous system is consistently on high alert. You're not just doing your job, you're surviving it. So let me give an example of what you might hear in a healthy environment versus a toxic environment. In a healthy environment, you might hear, "Your presentation had a lot of strong points, especially your analysis of the data. I'd suggest adding more detail to the conclusion to make the key takeaway more memorable." But in a toxic work environment, it sounds more like, "This just didn't land for me. I really expected more. Maybe you're not ready for this level of work." The first one is specific, developmental, and grounded in respect. The second is vague, dismissive, and rooted in ego. That's the difference. So if this sounds familiar to you, and you're working in a toxic work environment, over time it starts to change how you see yourself, how you relate to others, and how you show up in the rest of your life. It can seriously make you begin to doubt your abilities, even if you've been successful for years. Have you stopped speaking up in meetings? Or do you avoid projects that once excited you? Self-preservation is overriding, and many of us have been there. The emotional load of a toxic work environment doesn't just shut off when you leave the office either. You bring it home with you, and it bleeds into your evenings, your weekends, your relationships. People often report becoming more irritable at home, more withdrawn from friends, and even losing motivation for hobbies or exercise. And this can cause a cycle of stress where each source bleeds into the next. Physically, chronic stress from a toxic workplace can show up as headaches, sleep disturbances, digestive issues, and lowered immunity. How are we supposed to function in our best when we're experiencing all of these symptoms? This is the direct impact of consistent exposure to a toxic work environment, and it's extremely stressful. And possibly one of the most painful things, it chips away at our sense of hope, where every day can feel like a battle, and it becomes harder to envision a future where work is fulfilling or even neutral. But don't lose your hope. And know that if you stay focused and you take steps to move forward in a healthy way, things will get better. And we'll talk about some options you might have to support your move forward further on in this episode. So the truth is that yes, we experience this toxicity from a personal level. But toxicity doesn't just harm individuals. It tanks productivity. People spend more time managing office politics than doing meaningful work. Have you ever found yourself frustrated from office politics? In a toxic environment, psychological safety disappears. So it's inevitable that innovation stalls. Team members start withholding feedback or staying silent in meetings out of fear of being targeted. And ultimately, people disengage or just leave. I'm sure you've heard about quiet quitting, and it's growing in popularity. This is why it's critical that employers identify when and where this is happening, as it can directly impact the company's bottom line. A 2023 Gallup report found that employees who work in toxic environments are 66% more likely to experience frequent burnout and 55% more likely to actively disengage from their work. This disengagement costs the US companies hundreds of billions of dollars each year in lost productivity, turnover, and healthcare costs. So turnover skyrockets, absenteeism increases, burnout spreads, and no amount of performance tracking or team building events can undo the damage of a culture that punishes authenticity. This is why it's so important for companies to take notice and take action. We need to do better. But there is good news. And the good news is that organizations are starting to recognize this impact. A 2022 report by McKinsey & Company found that nearly 70% of surveyed executives said improving workplace culture, including addressing toxicity, was a top priority for long-term success. Some companies are beginning to understand that well-being and psychological safety are not just nice-to-haves, but essential for peak performance and retention. So if you're currently working in a toxic environment, what can you do now? Well, don't play their game. When you see people tearing others down to boost their own ego, don't join in, even silently. Silence can feel like agreement. Now, you don't have to go confronting everyone, but just disengaging and not participating is a quiet but powerful form of resistance. The concept of counter-control, introduced by psychologist B.F. Skinner, describes how individuals resist coercive or controlling behaviors through non-compliance or withdrawal. This form of passive resistance can be effective in situations where direct confrontation is risky or unlikely to lead to positive change. So while silence can sometimes be misconstrued as agreement, strategic disengagement, choosing not to participate in harmful behaviors, can be a valid and impactful form of resistance. It's a way to uphold personal values and influence group dynamics without direct confrontation. You can also protect your energy. Set boundaries. And that might mean turning off Slack notifications for a certain period of time, maybe not answering emails on the weekends, or mentally detaching from gossip or drama. And this is important. Learn to recognize when you're being baited into reactive emotions and give a strong pause before engaging. Pausing helps you stay grounded and centered in your own power. And baiting is usually intended to provoke a reaction. A pause disrupts that cycle and keeps you from giving them power. When you don't engage as expected, it often unsettles the person who's trying to provoke you. And that shift can give you the upper hand and signal that their behavior doesn't control you. And if you take a moment to remain clear, responding with thoughtfulness lets you act in alignment with your values instead of being dragged down to someone else's level. If you work in a toxic work environment, you can also keep receipts. Document your work, track your contributions, and don't rely on memory or good faith alone. This isn't about being paranoid. It's about protecting yourself and being your own advocate. Keep a file of emails, meeting notes, accomplishments, or any problematic interactions. That way, you can go back and reference if needed and provide clear, honest documentation. This is also a great way to keep you from going crazy and to know what actually happened in a situation or what you truly accomplished versus what other people are saying. And seek out allies. It's important to have support. Even in toxic work environments, there are usually a few people who value integrity. Build quiet support networks with them. These allies can validate your experiences, help you stay grounded, and sometimes even serve as a witness if things escalate. You can also find external support if needed. You can reach out to a therapist. Their work focuses on healing the past, resolving emotional wounds, and helping you process long-term stress or abuse, or even PTSD. If your workplace experience has left you feeling emotionally unstable or physically unwell, therapy is a critical step. You could also reach out to a coach, and coaches focus on the present and the future, offering clarity, accountability, and strategic planning to help you move forward. Now, coaching doesn't treat mental health conditions, but what it does do is empowers you to take action in your career with intention and helps you move forward. But just remember that in the end, it's important that everybody has a support system, especially in these situations. Also, focus on your values. In an environment where ethics are compromised, anchoring yourself in your own values can help you maintain your integrity. Just ask yourself, what kind of professional do I want to be? What kind of human do I want to be? Regardless of what is happening around me, you don't want to feel guilt and disappointment later when all is said and done. And if you're not sure what your values are, I have a free tool that you can use on my website. I'll share that at the end of this podcast that you can use to help you determine what those might be. And one very important thing to do is to create a personal exit plan. Now, you don't need to quit tomorrow, but start preparing. Clean up your resume, start networking, update your LinkedIn, and track your accomplishments outside the toxic lens of your current workplace. Begin identifying what you want in your next role. Use the dysfunction that you're experiencing now as a guide to what you won't tolerate again. But if leaving in the near future is not an option, just remember to focus on what you can control. Whatever that is in your situation, the small wins matter. And reconnect with your self-worth. Toxic work environments can erode your confidence. So surround yourself outside of work with people who reflect your value back to you, whether that be friends, family, mentors, or support groups. Remind yourself of who you are beyond the walls of your current job. So in our next episode, we're going to dive deeper into how leadership fuels or fights toxic work culture. We'll talk about how to identify red flags before you say yes to the job, because yes, toxic culture shows up in interviews. And I'll share 2 unforgettable stories, one about the time an interviewer cried during my interview, and another about a toxic meeting environment where the meeting was centered in ego instead of solutions. That episode will help you assess leadership's role in toxicity and teach you what to look for and listen for when you're interviewing. Until then, remember, you deserve a workplace where you can grow, be respected, and do meaningful work without sacrificing your sanity. If you'd like, you can join me on Facebook at SYME Professional Coaching and Consulting. That's SYME Professional Coaching and Consulting. Or you can visit my website, which is SYMECC.com. If this episode resonated, please share it with someone you care about. You never know who might need to hear it. See you next time.